Elisabeth Kendall, a senior research fellow in Arabic and Islamic studies at Pembroke College at the University of Oxford. Welcome to you all. Elisabeth, let me ask you first. Is the timing right, do you think, now for people to heed the UN Secretary-General's call for a ceasefire? Might conditions on the ground mean there could be one?
I think there is now an opportunity in this awful adversity. Now really is the time, as the United Nations Secretary-General and the Special Envoy have both said, to lay down the weapons before an even greater catastrophe engulfs Yemen. If ever the two main warring sides needed an excuse, so to speak, to start to pull back from their very intransigent positions, this is it. And they could be statesmanlike, they wouldn't need to make excuses. It's very clear that the urgency of the moment gives them an opportunity to really behave in a way that, for once, puts the people of Yemen first. Now, I don't think that this is at all an opportunity to solve the long-term issues of Yemen's war, which are very complex, none of which have been really addressed. But it does certainly give everyone an excuse to get around the table, to get into political discussions, to allow the UN to step in and broker the beginning of a long-term solution.
Elisabeth, you touched on the intransigence of both sides in this conflict, but if the Houthis have got the upper hand, why have a ceasefire now when they are in this position of strength?
Well, the problem here is that no side ever figures it's the ultimate optimal time for a ceasefire. At some point, the sides do have to sit down and talk. This is the time. Don't forget, Yemen has already seen over 2 million cases of cholera. One can only imagine what the coronavirus would do to Yemen at a time when the health sector is in ruins.
But the UN's really struggled to mediate this conflict in Yemen. Are they, do you think, still the best brokers for this? Should we be looking elsewhere, other Gulf countries, or an alternative to the UN?
Yes, I can understand why many now look at the United Nations and think this war has gone on for 5 years. Many people saw it coming for many years before that. Why on earth have they not managed to find a solution? So confidence is low in the UN. But think of it like this. They really had a poison chalice. I think that things have massively improved since Martin Griffiths took over as Special Envoy. Progress has been made. A peace agreement of sorts, a ceasefire, was signed in Stockholm in 2018. It was very vague and it's been difficult to implement. And things haven't got too much worse. And so at least the UN is neutral. It's very hard to find other neutral players in this.
Elisabeth, I do need to ask you about the Saudi-UAE relationship. Both of them seem to be looking for a way out of the Yemen quagmire. But how are there strains in the relationship between the two? We know there's a very good personal rapport between the leader of the UAE and the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia. But other than that, are there strains that could also affect any ceasefire?
Yes, you're right to raise this. There certainly are strains. Now, of course, we did see the Riyadh agreement being signed in November last year, which papered over the cracks in the coalition and enabled their two proxies on the ground, being the Southern Transitional Council, supported by the UAE, and the Hadi government, supported by Saudi Arabia and nominally also by UAE, to mend their differences. This was just a cosmetic solution. It kicked the can down the road. None of the underlying issues have been solved. And the Southerners still, at least the proportion of them represented by the Southern Transitional Council, still want secession as their ultimate goal, and the Hadi government doesn't.